Good morning, Wilmington Senior Men's Club. Today, we bring you via streaming video the cartoons of Bill Malden's Willie and Joe, his two fictional World War II soldier buddies on the European battlefront. We'd like to dedicate this program to John Golden. As you know, John was a well-known musical personality and storyteller in Wilmington and Eastern North Carolina. John made this presentation live to the World War II Remembered Group on May 24th, 2017. Unfortunately, John passed away on January 29th of this year. We will miss you, John Golden. Bill Malden published a collection of his cartoons entitled Up Front in 1945 and received a Pulitzer Prize for them. Bill spent a lot of time in World War II at or near the battlefront. His two characters, Willie and Joe, are an amalgam of many soldiers that he knew personally. Picture now, these two dog faces are really very young men, perhaps 20 to 22 years old. But the rigors of war have matured them quickly into men a lot older.
Willie is sitting with his feet in his helmet. The helmet's full of water. Joe says, "Willie, what am I going to tell the old man?" Willie says, "You tell the old man I'm sitting up with two sick friends." Do retreating blisters hurt as much as advancing blisters? If you don't mind, I'll consult with PFC Johnson. He's our famous blister specialist. Willie says to Joe, "Aim between the eyes, Joe. Sometimes they charge when they're wounded." They're sitting with debris all around them. They look at each other. Willie says to Joe, "I feel like a fugitive from the law of averages." Willie is sitting in a mud puddle with no clothes on. Says, "Joe, you want to jump in?" "No thanks, Willie. I'll go back for some mud that ain't been used yet." Bullets are whizzing all around over their heads. They're way in the mud, trying to avoid the bullets. "I can't get any lower, Willie. My buttons are all in the way." Again, in the midst of a war zone, there's debris all around. There's one window with one pane left. Willie says, "Go ahead, Joe. If you don't bust it out, you'll worry about it all night." They're getting off a ship down into a smaller dinghy. Joe says to Willie, when you hit the water, swish your feet around. They sure can use it. They've just landed. Joe is crawling up on the beach. Willie is in a hole. He looks up. Joe says, what are you doing down there? Willie says, I'm looking for turtle eggs, Junior. This is in Italy. Gives a little understanding to the joke. They're crawling up a cliff. They're only rocks. But the man in charge says, hit the dirt, boys. Willie looks to Joe and he says, you know, you wouldn't get so tired if you didn't carry extra stuff. Throw the joker away from the deck, from the other cards. They're ready to go on a long march, as they've done so many times. Joe says to Willie, you won't have any trouble picking up our trail after the first 5 miles. Bullets whizzing all around. They're in a Jeep. Willie says, you know, I hate to run on a flat. It wears the hell out of the tires. The mail truck is all mangled up. It's been hit. So Willie and Joe are talking about it. He said, why are you looking so sad? I got out of it okay. Looking over all the crashed vehicles. They were at the ordnance lot. Joe says, I'll be darned. Here's one that was wrecked in combat.
Willie and Joe are walking down a road, and scattered all along the road are gas masks. And Joe says to Willie, you know, newer isn't always better. Willie is standing over a Jeep. Another soldier with a towel and a shaving brush, and another soldier with a helmet under the Jeep taking water out of the radiator. Run it up the mountain, Joe. It ain't hot enough. And Joe says, you guys think I got nothing better to do than go up and down the hill? The platoon sergeant is talking to Willie, Joe, and another soldier, and he says, I need a couple of guys what don't owe me no money for a routine patrol. And Joe says, sorry, Sarge, you're going to have to try some other guys. Willie and Joe are in a bombed out building, and a German soldier is walking by with a full jug. Joe says to Willie, "Be careful. That's high-class booze he's carrying." Willie and Joe are manufacturing a still. And Joe says, "Hell of a way to waste time. Does it work?" To which he replies, "I still don't know." Willie and Joe are in a foxhole under a German tank. And Joe is on the radio to somebody. He says, "Able Fox 5 to Able Fox, I got a target, but you got to be patient because we really are in hull defilade." A general officer with 3 stars pulls up in front of the officer's mess. One of the soldiers said, "Another dang mouth to feed." The chief cook says, "See, that's what you get for putting out good chow." He'll probably even want a plate. Two soldiers are sitting in a jeep with mud up to the hubs. "I'll never splash mud on a dog face again." 999. "I'll never splash mud on a dog face again." 1000. "Now will you help us push?" Willie says, "We live in this stuff and they're bitching about getting splashed?" A general officer is sitting in a jeep with Willie and Joe in front of him with a mine detector. The general says, "Don't hurry for me, son. I like to see young men take an interest in their work." Willie is talking to a tech sergeant, not in a combat uniform, and there are 2 other soldiers not in combat uniforms sitting at the table with a bottle of cognac. Willie says, "We call them paratroopers. They're too far forward to wear ties and too far back to get shot." And the tech sergeant says, "That's another word for rare area MFs." Willie is talking to the captain. He has 5 holes in his helmet. All 5 fingers are through the holes in the helmet. The captain says, "Nonsense. S2 reported that machine gun was silenced hours ago. Stop wiggling your fingers at me." He says, "But sir, these ain't moth holes." They're digging a foxhole. One's got a shovel, one's got a pick. Willie says, "You'll get over it, Joe. Once I was going to write a book exposing the Army after the war myself, but nobody would believe what I wrote wasn't fiction." Three soldiers are talking. One is sitting down, no helmet on, And he says, sure, I got seniority. I got busted a week before you did. Willie and Joe and a lieutenant are in a bunker playing cards. Willie says, by the way, what was them changes you were going to make when you took over last month, sir? There is a general officer with a swagger stick standing next to Willie and Joe, who are hunkered down. Joe says, sir, do you have to draw fire while you're inspiring us? Two officers are standing on a ledge looking down into a valley. One officer says to the other, beautiful view. Is there one for the enlisted men? The other officer says, yeah, their view is the shit flowing downhill.
Joe's looking out of the trenches. Across the way, Willie is with his harmonica. Joe says, you know, the Krauts ain't following you so good on Lily Marlene tonight. You think maybe something happened to their tenor? They're on the battlefield. Joe is sitting with he's zipping up his coat up and down. Willie is down on the deck with his ears covered like he's expecting something. Joe says, ever notice the funny sound those zippers make, Willie? This is a good one. It's raining, really raining hard. They have their helmets on, and you see the rain splashing off the helmets. Willie says, you know, now that you mention it, Joe, it does sound a lot like the patter of rain on a tin roof. Another good one, if you've been in a real war. Joe, yesterday you saved my life, and I swore I'd pay you back. Here's my last pair of dry socks. They're both digging trenches. Well, one might be doing a trench, one might be doing a latrine. But the point is, Joe says, me future is settled, Willie. I'm going to be an expert on all types of European soil. They're walking along. Joe is leading the mule. They have their things that they take care of people with, take care of the sick. Willie is up on the mule. He says, I call her my Florence Nightingale. They're in a lean-to with a cover around it. And somebody wants to get in there. Dogs, cats. Joe says, let him in. I want to see a critter I can feel sorry for. Willie is standing there in front of a little girl. Willie has cigarettes. He's got a pan for frying something. He's got warm clothes. He's got something he's getting ready to put in the pan. The little girl has only a bucket, which looks like it's an empty bucket. A true picture of the prince and the pauper. Joe is looking over at Willie. Willie is surrounded by some little kids, a boy and a girl, and he's telling them a story. Joe says, you know, I wish somebody would tell me there's a Santa Claus. There's a poor farmer sitting in the rubble all around him. Everything is gone. Joe says to Willie, look, tell him to look at the bright side of things, Willie. His trees is pruned, his ground is plowed up, and the house is air conditioned. I like that.
There's a sterno heater with a tin can on top of it. Joe says to Willie, drop the cans in the coffee gentle, Joe. We got a chicken stewing in the bottom. Joe says, when I get out, I ain't gonna eat anything out of a can, ever. Joe wakes up under a cow with the cow's udders over his head. Breakfast in bed? This is utterly crazy. They're in camouflage. There's a machine gun. And Willie says to Joe, I could have swore a couple of krauts was using that cow for cover. Joe, go wake up the cooks. The two of them are behind a bombed-out wall with their weapons at the ready. Joe says to Willie, them was his exact words, I envy the way you dog faces get first pick of women and liquor in towns. Willie says, and what planet was he from, Joe? Or was he in the Navy? Willie and Joe are taking a break. Willie has a newspaper in his hand with a hole through the middle, and he's reading. So Archibald kissed her again and gently put his head on the pillow. She gazed at him with half-shut eyes, trembling hard. Don't forget to buy next week's installment. at your newsstand. Willie and Joe are on guard duty. Willie turns to Joe and says, "Why the hell couldn't you have born a beautiful woman?" Joe says, "Same reason you were born so ugly." In a bunker, all the guys are surrounding the bunker. Some guys are playing cards with a medic. It says, "Who started the rumor? I was playing poker with a beautiful nurse." Willie says, "Rumor control is out of control." Four guys are sitting around a sterno fire. One turns to a soldier with his helmet on and says, "Take off your hat when you mention sex here. It's a reverent subject." And the soldier says, "Why is something so hard to get all we guys think about?" Willie is staring down at a PFC with a beautiful blonde sitting next to him, overlooking a town. The PFC said, "I asked her to teach me to yodel. She taught me to yodel." "So, buddy, is she the Swiss Miss?" says Joe.
There are a group of men making an invasion at night. Willie and Joe are in the front of the landing craft. They will be the first to hit the beach. Overhead, rockets and flares are lighting up the sky. Machine gun bullets and tracer rounds are whizzing by all around them. Willie says to Joe, "Try to say something funny." Bill Malden was a tech sergeant in the 45th Infantry. He worked for the Army newspaper, Stars and Stripes. He was in or near much of the action in France, Italy, and finally Germany. He had his own Jeep and was permitted to roam, observe, record the war from a very close-up perspective. Great war correspondent Ernie Pyle said this about Bill Malden: "Sergeant Bill Malden seemed to us over there to be the finest cartoonist the war had produced, and not merely because his cartoons are funny, but because they are also so terribly grim and real. Malden's cartoons aren't about training camp life, which is most familiar to people at home. They are about the men in the line, the tiny percentage of our vast army who are actually doing the dying. His cartoons are about the war." Bill received his second Pulitzer Prize for his cartoon of Abraham Lincoln weeping after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Bill Malden, born October 21st, 1921, died January 22nd, 2003.